Howdy ho folks, CR here, and today I will be responding to Riley Dennis. And Riley, I know this is going to be triggering to you, but you really do need to watch and learn. Because apparently you're here, there, and all over the place on what freedom of speech is versus actual violence. So I hope to spell this out to you here a little bit.
On January 20th, 2017, thousands of people across the country showed up to protest Trump's inauguration. But specifically in Washington, D.C., about 200 people were arrested for allegedly rioting. They were
Allegedly? I know, if they were simply protesting, that would be perfectly fine. And the worst thing you can say about them at that point is that they're just being crybabies because they lost an election. But when you're actually rioting, you need to be arrested. You have the right to freedom of speech, not to go around and attack people, destroy people's property, light stuff on fire in the streets. Those aren't covered under the First Amendment. You have the right to peaceably assemble. What they were doing was not peaceable.
Arrested using a police technique that has been widely criticized, known as kettling. Kettling is when police force all of the people in a certain area into a small space where they can't escape. In this case,
yes, the police do need to do something in order to stop the riot and arrest the people causing the issues. If you think kettling is bad, you need to look into the polls eye and what they do. Or hell, there are a lot of other countries where the police just use live ammunition on you, and that's that. So, you're complaining about kettling. I get the feeling that you can complain that anything the police do is unjust or fascistic or something of that nature, Riley.
Around 200 people were swept up in the kettle and forced to remain there for hours without food or water or bathroom facilities.
Now, the real crime, Riley, is that they didn't have their adult coloring books given to them when they needed it.
There are allegations that pepper spray, flashbang grenades, and concussion grenades were used indiscriminately against protesters.
Okay, Riley, this is called crowd control. If you don't want to be exposed to concussion grenades, flashbangs, CS, or pepper spray, or anything like that, when people in your protest start rioting, start throwing bricks, stuff like that, get away from them. Don't let them back around you. Let the police do their job. Don't let them get back within your ranks. So the police have a harder time doing their job. It's just that simple, dude.
There are also allegations of sexual abuse, like rectal probes being used in the kettle. And all of those arrested had their phones taken and searched against their will. On top,
yes, the police have probable cause at that point. Crimes were being committed. Serious crimes were being committed, yes. They are trying to investigate those crimes and get all the evidence they can. It's part of police work.
On top of that, most of the people arrested are being prosecuted for multiple felony offenses, including rioting, conspiracy to riot, inciting a riot, and destruction of property.
Okay, let me explain something to you. When you go there and you're all dressed in black and you got masks on, and people who are all dressed in black and have masks on too are destroying property, attacking people, lighting fires, throwing stuff at the police, and then they retreat back into your crowd to avoid identification, you are aiding and abetting them. That is conspiracy to riot right there. Even though you weren't the one throwing the brick, you're still culpable in that situation.
Means they could each face up to 60 years in prison. Some of them took a plea deal and will spend less than 10 years in prison, but most of them will be on trial over the course of the next year or so. Currently, about...
Riley, when you break the law, there are consequences. And these guys were committing actual crimes against people and their property. They were setting stuff on fire. They were breaking windows. And even if not every person was directly engaged in that, they were dressed the same way that the people who were engaging in those crimes were dressed in. They were providing cover for them from the police. That's aiding and abetting. Yes, there are penalties for the crimes you commit. This sound suppressor, I possess legally. I have the paperwork for it. I've paid the $200 tax stamp. I've waited my time for the ATF to approve off on it. Yet, if I was to do something such as leave this with my own mother for a few days, well, that could be up to 10 years in prison for both of us. Yes, when you break the law, there are consequences to breaking the law.
About 6 people at a time are on trial. The issue at hand here is that there doesn't seem to be any evidence that these people directly caused any of the damage or were actually involved in the rioting. Because
no evidence.
they were all arrested using the kettling technique, many innocent bystanders, including journalists, medics, and peaceful protesters, were caught up in it as well.
And many journalists were released. And as long as the journalist is just there reporting, doing their job, not impeding the police, not chanting, not joining in with those rioters, they should be fine. They should be released. As for the other peaceful protesters, well, let's say even you're peacefully protesting and people start breaking the law around you, start throwing bricks, start egging the police on, start destroying property, start setting fires, and you stand there. Well, how much concern do you really have of your own safety, your own criminal record at that point? You know, you should be trying to separate yourself from that if you really care about your own future.
Tried not because there is evidence that they did anything, but because they happened to be in the same place as those who were rioting.
And again, this goes back to common sense. If you're peacefully protesting and people start throwing bricks, they start smashing windows, start burning cars, start attacking people, you should be separating yourself from those people. So that way the police don't confuse you for them. That way you don't get tear gassed. That way you don't get pepper sprayed. That way you don't get concussion grenades thrown at you. You need to separate yourself from those people so the police can focus on those people and not you.
Punishing them based on collective responsibility. If you are peacefully protesting and someone near you breaks a window or something, are you responsible?
You are responsible for, at bare minimum, separating yourself from that person and not letting that person come back into your crowd to where they can hide from the police in your crowd. It's about not being a human shield for that guy.
You go to prison for 60 years because the people around you caused some damage? That seems to be what the prosecutors are trying to say. If you have any involvement with a political group or protest that causes some level of harm, even if only by a few individuals, you are then culpable as well.
And Riley, you remember the Tea Parties, right? When they were a thing, you know, the media was calling them a racist, angry mob, even though that wasn't true. And then all of your little leftist friends jumped in to call them racist, angry white men. You remember that? Oh, well, let's bring up an even more recent example. Remember when David Duke decided to support Donald Trump, put his support in for Donald Trump, and your side was accusing Trump at this point of being culpable because David Duke just happened to support him, and that abuse went on to the rest of his supporters too? Yeah, you have no business talking about guilt by association and chiding that.
Set a dangerous precedent for the US moving forward. Police using unjust techniques like kettling and people being sentenced to far too long in prison for property destruction. These things.
And again, if I was to leave this at a good friend's house, my mother's house, my father's house, and I wasn't there, that could be 10 years in prison for me and all parties involved. Don't tell me they're being too harsh for punishing property destruction.
These aren't really new. The police have long used excessive force, and the state has always tried to quash protests they deem unruly.
Excessive force may be in your eyes, but let's look what happens when the police don't step in soon enough. Over $100,000 in property damage was done that night, and somebody's free speech was quashed. Thanks to people on your side. Thanks to a group that, by the way, you've done a video supporting.
It doesn't make those things okay, and it's horrible that anyone would spend so long in prison for
Well, aside from you sticking up for Antifa and claiming that misgendering, as you put it, a trans person is an act of violence and should be stopped, are you footing the bill for these broken windows? These few broken windows, as you put it. Are you footing the bill for destroyed property? Are you footing the bill for the fires that were started? Are you footing the hospital bills that these people cause other people? That these Antifa fucks cause other people? No. Okay, well, shut your fucking mouth.
A few broken windows. But what is new here is the precedent it could set moving forward for collective responsibility and the ability for the state to rule any protest a riot if there's even a minuscule amount of property damage. And the trial...
You are not talking about a minuscule amount of property damage here. You're talking about sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage being caused. You're talking about people getting seriously injured here. You're talking about other people's free speech getting shut down here. Get off your fucking high horse, dude.
That is currently ongoing, prosecutors aren't even alleging that the defendants directly caused any of the property damage. They're just trying to convict them on the fact that they were there and possibly associated with the people who did cause property damage. That seems...
No, the prosecution is not trying to just do a simple guilt by association prosecution on these guys. The prosecutors are trying to prosecute these guys based on the fact that these guys were providing cover for the people that were breaking the law, that were damaging the property. When you sit there and somebody goes and throws a brick through a window or lights a car on fire or lights a trash can on fire and then retreats back into the crowd, and the crowd is shielding the police from arresting the perpetrator of that crime, that's aiding and abetting. That falls under the category that the prosecutors are charging these people with.
Seems unbelievable to me, but it's happening. And you can bet that the people who say they stand for free speech are suddenly going to go quiet when leftist and anarchist protesters are having their rights stripped away like this.
No, Riley, I am not silent about this. As a right-leaning libertarian, I'm actually in support of police arresting these people, kettling them in, and the judicial system prosecuting these people. Because you're not talking about freedom of speech here. You're talking about some people committing violence against persons and property, and then another group of people impeding the police's ability to arrest them. They're providing cover for these violent criminals. You get me? And by the way, again, you have no business sitting there talking about your support of free speech. You're in favor of people being censored because of their views. You're in favor of calling misgendering a trans person, as you put it, an act of violence. You know, you're supportive of Antifa, who goes out there and shuts down other people's freedom of speech. So no, don't complain to me on this one either.
ACLU is suing the DC Police Department for violating the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights of the defendants. They claim that police conducted unconstitutional arrests, used excessive force, denied arrested people food, water, and access to toilets, and conducted invasive bodily searches.
And you know what? The police were well within their right to do that. I don't care what the ACLU says. The police were there. They were observing crimes being committed. At that point, it's not an unreasonable search or seizure. It's not violating any of their constitutionally protected rights. They don't have a right to violently assemble. They don't have a right to destroy other people's property. When property is being destroyed right there in front of the police's faces, when people are being attacked right there in front of the police's faces, they now have reasonable cause to search people. The Fourth Amendment protects you against unreasonable searches and seizures. What the police were doing were reasonable searches and seizures. And you know what? With this, I'm going to wrap this up right here. And I think my next video is going to be on the cause and effect of this type of behavior that these black bloc people are doing. Because, Riley, you really don't get it, do you?